Warpugs, it feels like we've been on a magical journey through time and space. We've witnessed the birth of stars, watched the collapse of them, the death of them, and the formation of black holes. We have seen the pulsing of neutron stars and the inevitable heat, death, decay of the universe in far-flung portions. Or we could have just been watching the Russian Navy does what it does, I say best, but what it does worse. Guys, the Russian Navy sucks, part 5. Whiskey on the rocks. This is history of everything. And it is everything at this moment. Warpugs, it is 2 pugs running in and out of my room. It is a wonder how... I don't understand it, man. I just don't understand it. The level of just sheer insanity. Hey. Come here, you. Sorry. I was doing an intro and then this decided to show up. Look at it. It has no mercy. It has no regrets. How does it feel knowing that you're more competent than the Russian Navy? Yes, you're more competent than the Russian Navy. You so are. You're so cute. Guys, the Russian Navy sucks, part 5. My stupid intro is out of the way. All of History of Everything's links are in the description down below, including my own. Check the description down below, yes. And hit subscribe if you haven't already, yes. Oh, look at that little tiny thing. Look at the little tiny butt. Look at it. It's so small. She's so tiny. Oh, she's so cute. Oh, little Pippa. She is little Pippa. Her name was supposed to be Pipsqueak, but it's Pippa now. I blame the kids. I blame the kids for everything. Guys, yeah. Check the links in the description. Subscribe to History of Everything. Subscribe to me. History of Everything. Please let me know if you watch this, and please let me know if you saw this little small. Yes. Guys, also, I just moved into the house, and her claw is sticking to my shirt. And I have, because several people asked me to, open up an Amazon wish list. It's in the description down below. Shutting up, moving on. Let's get going. Let's rock. You threw off everything. I had such a good intro lined up. I had everything rolled out. But I think you made it better. I really do.
Before we get started, this weekend I will be doing a 24-hour live stream.
Hey!
Yep, 24 hours. The goal will be to raise as much funds as possible for Ukrainian children for this Christmas period, to ensure that many of these kids who have lost their parents or who have not seen their parents in a long time get a present and can just have an enjoyable holiday, disregarding all the horrible things that are happening to them. The fundraiser will be done through a PayPal link to Frontline Kitchen. You may have heard of Frontline Kitchen. They've done some amazing work. So just as a heads up, that's what we will be doing this weekend. If you come to the stream, please do not donate to me. Do not donate to me.
Ow.
Donate to the PayPal link. Cheers.
Ow.
On to the video.
Oh.
Sweden. The soon-to-be final part of Lake NATO. A nation known for PewDiePie, IKEA, meatballs, a very, very nice-looking wooden ship that can't really sail upright, and genuinely really nice people. But what if I told you that they were secretly a nation of maniacs, with plans directed at the Soviet Union and Russia that would make the Finns and the Poles blush?
Oh.
Well, you're in for a treat as I descended to the deep lore that is the Swedish defense plans.
Oh my God.
And how a Soviet submarine very nearly triggered them by crashing onto a rock and getting stuck. Yes, that is right. The Soviets nearly made Sweden, the country that had been neutral for literally a century, turn into the doom guy through sheer incompetence.
If it's not obvious, I'm a very happy man because I have this little book. Look at her. She has completely derailed this video. You have completely derailed it. Yes, you have.
A bit of background. The Soviets, for the most part, vanity projects aside, understood that they would never be able to fight the Western powers at sea and win. So they built a metric shit ton of diesel submarines, diesel electric submarines, to supplement their nuclear boats in order to essentially flood the sea with as many submarines as possible and gain a numerical advantage. Think T-72 but underwater. It's meh and not that great, but there's a lot of them, it'll do something. Now, there are some benefits to electric boats too. They are quieter in some cases. Well, Western ones are quieter. We don't talk about how loud Soviet submarines are.
Let's not get into that.
But by the by, and given that this is the Baltic, they kind of fit the theatre quite well. One of these classes of submarines were the Project 613, 640, 644, and 665, the NATO reporting name being Whiskey. Now, the Soviets built 236 of them from 1950 to 1958, and by 1981, when our story starts, they were really, really long in the tooth, and probably in quite the horrific state considering this is the Soviet Union in the early 1980s, in the throes of economic stagnation and, well, just general sadness. Our particular glass of sadness in question was the S-363, laid down on the 12th of January 1956 and commissioned on the 17th of September 1957 in Leningrad. She was 76 metres long, weighed about 1,000 tonnes, and was armed with 6 torpedo tubes, with 18 torpedoes or 24 sea mines as her weapons. She had a crew of about 60 and could plod along at a respectable 18 knots surfaced and 13 knots submerged.
That's
nothing
respectable.
special, but it's a cheap diesel electric, it's quite dangerous if undetected, and it's really the kind of boat you're looking for trade interdiction and surveillance. And a comparable boat would be, for example, this one, the HMAS Onslow, which is now a museum ship in Sydney. Very much an older design, great at spying though. In the blue corner you have the Swedes, the country that determined the Red Bear was really the only threat. This was done shortly after the Corporal played Russian roulette in 1945, and it had built itself up in preparation for a war. In a naval sense, during the Second World War, Sweden's naval forces had largely been responsible for ensuring that she remained neutral and was not invaded by German forces. Centered around really powerful coastal battleships, defense vessels, and cruisers, it was very much a case of any invasion by the Germans would simply be far too costly, and her fleet and being truly worked wonders. Had the Germans tried it, it is very likely that you would see a fair few repeats of what the Norwegians did to the Blucher. And quite simply, Germany didn't want to risk her bigger ships. Why would she when she could simply keep trade open? And everything was fine. It's not like Sweden was going to say no to trade. They were covered on each side by an Axis member. With the Soviet threat on the horizon, the Swedish Navy reorganised itself to meet the current threat, discarding larger, more powerful coastal defence battleships and cruisers and turning their guns into coastal batteries, with smaller submarines, destroyers, and corvettes truly becoming a modern, if not very small, fighting force with a singular goal. That goal being that if the Soviets tried it, they would pay in blood.
The incident.
On the evening of the 27th of October 1981, Soviet submarine S-363 bonked into an underwater rock about 10 kilometers or 6.2 miles from the south coast naval base at Karlskrona, and it was forced to surface very much inside of Swedish waters and was now stuck firmly on the rock. It was, kind of obvious to the Swedes who were conducting a naval exercise next door to where the submarine was stuck on a rock.
Just so everyone is firmly aware, one, I don't know anything about this. I never heard about this. I did not know about this. And two, if you ever wind up in a submarine and you get on rocks this close to another nation, you screwed up. You screwed up major. It doesn't matter what event led you to be that close to their shores in the first place. It is now called an international incident.
A Swedish officer, having been informed by a local, made his way over, unarmed, and boarded the submarine, and in something that must have been out of a Monty Python skit, walked up to the conning tower and met with the Soviet captain. The gist of their conversation being, why the ever-loving shit are you here, and how did this happen? And the Soviet submarine captain responding with saying that there were simultaneous failures of all navigational equipment, and it had caused the boat to get lost. Please ignore the fact that we have somehow navigated through rocks, straits, and islands, and a multitude of other nautical obstacles to get to this point in the first place. Given that this is the Soviet navies in the 80s, a sudden rush of incompetence and shit to the brain, and breaking of equipment is somewhat to be believed, if not expected. Most likely, though, they were spying on the nearby naval exercise taking place at Karlskrona. The Soviets, being allergic to telling the truth,
this would be literally anyone's guess.
about basically anything due to their obsession with saving face, see China, would later issue a statement with the claim that the boat was forced into Swedish waters, past rocks, straits and islands and other naval vessels that could have helped it, due to severe distress. Now, whether Ivan and Yuri caused this distress by eating all the doctor's sausage and drinking all the vodka, we may never know, but it is safe to say that the statement was somewhere between utter crap and complete bollocks. The Soviet reaction to the grounding of the submarine on the rocks about 20 kilometers from Karlskrona officially was, as I said, an accident. Unofficially, they appear to have crapped themselves and sent multiple aircraft to search for the bloody thing. Swedish reports hint at the fact the Soviets didn't exactly know where the submarine was at first, just that it was lost, at least until news broke, with the general thought being that the sub was grounded at Kristanzio, a completely different geographical area to where it actually was. Worth pointing out here that the sub captain had exceptional experience with navigation according to both Swedish and Soviet sources, at least allegedly. Now, it is possible, and according to a Swedish report which, and I quote, argues that the military authorities of the Soviet Union were not always competent. See, it's not just me. The Swedes think it too, that this was all a Soviet naval shenanigan, and it was possible that it was a distraction because the Soviets knew that they'd been found out and caught, which they had. This is somewhat evidenced by the fact that Soviet naval vessels, including a Krivat-class frigate, made their way to the area where the sub had now appeared.
Oh boy.
And externally, visually, they looked to be cleared for action. What is funny, though, is that the Soviets claim the submarine only started having on the issues on the 28th, when it got stuck on the rock on the 27th.
Oh boy.
There is a bit of a time lapse difference here due to time zones, so I'm willing to give them that one. So,
also brain damage from too much vodka.
So two versions of events here. TLDR, myself and a Swedish investigator are of the belief that the Soviets had no frickin' idea where the submarine actually was, but they knew they were up the proverbial creek and needed to find a way to save face and hopefully get a paddle. Now back on the sub. After having a chat with the Soviet captain and probably just ignoring him for half of it, because in my experience, Swedes are actually loath to fight anyone verbally, and, well, because he was watching a Soviet captain tell him everything was broken while he himself was staring at a perfectly fine gyro compass, yes, there was nothing wrong with it, Sweden launched an official diplomatic protest, calling the Soviet Union a very naughty boy and asking it to kindly bugger off and go home. At the same time, the coastal Jaegers were ordered into position in preparation if something funny was about to happen. Well, funnier than what had already happened with the submarine. As an interesting anecdote, they were ordered to wear their berets and not their helmets because, and I quote, it looked better. Which, yeah, I get that, drip is important, but it does show that the high command in Sweden wasn't exactly expecting a fight to break out. In response to the diplomatic protest, the Soviets, being the Soviets, lied and said that the gyro compass was still broken and that the submarine was there on accident, having wandered into and grounded on the 28th, not the 27th, but we spoke about that. And the best part is they still claimed that they were on Kristanzio, which means they weren't violating Swedish waters. No, they were violating Danish ones, which makes it better, I guess. Understandably, the Swedes were a little pissed off about this. They did not screw around with their borders. It was likely that they would not have the happiest response. So the submarine remains stuck, and a weird sort of limbo begins. Right about now, the Swedes decide, well, in for a penny, in for a pound, and they claim, considering the sub is there, in their waters, on their rock, next to their naval base, that they have salvage rights.
Oh.
The Kremlin, kicking and screaming, finally acknowledged that they breached Swedish waters and they said sorry. The Soviets, still hoping at this point to be seen as incompetent rather than malicious for reasons of saving face, are still hoping they'll get the submarine back. There'll be no fuss and everything will be fine. Sweden, on the other hand, is about 2 points short of popping a blood vessel and like a proper mad lad turned around, flipped the Soviet Union the diplomatic bird, and decided they would investigate what has happened further.
Oh, and this had every opportunity of going swimmingly.
After being guaranteed some political immunity, the Soviet captain was taken off the boat and interrogated in the presence of Soviet officials. Meanwhile, the Swedish naval officers began examining instruments and the logbooks of the Soviet submarine. The Soviets really didn't have much of a choice here, given that they were, well, stuck on a rock in front of Swedish coastal guns and half the Swedish Navy, so it's like, what can they actually do? And it's not like they're going anywhere. And now you may be wondering, what could little old Sweden, the country with a tiny population, do against the might of the Soviet Union? Well, the answer is...
Total Force Varsjens.
And no, I didn't just summon Thor or flat pack furniture. Total Defense Service is and was the Swedish plan on what exactly to do if war were ever going to be declared, and make no mistake, Sweden knew war would only come from one direction and one only, the old enemy, Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
Directly from the Swedish government's explanation, everyone between the ages of 16 and 70 living in Sweden is part of Sweden's total defence, and, if necessary, must help Sweden prepare for war. The obligation is called Total Defence Service, and this includes conscription in the armed forces, civilian service in, for example, emergency services departments or the armed forces, and general compulsory national service, which only applies in the event of a heightened state of alert. Quite simply, the idea is that every man, woman and child, whether he or she likes it, has one purpose and one purpose only should war ever come to Sweden. Kill the Reds. With that in mind, the entire Swedish military is built around this defensive strategy. For example, the Swedish Navy does not have large warships in the modern era.
True.
They have smaller craft such as the Visby-class corvette, which can move quickly and use geography to hold the border. Similarly, the tanks are designed with this in mind, hence the cheese wedge. I love the cheese wedge. And the hottest of all IFVs, the CV-90. The Swedish Air Force as well is built for this kind of asymmetric total warfare, having the ability to use any number of main roads and even side roads as bases, with quite literally hangars built into the side of mountains. Not unlike the kind of sneaky stuff you see Ukraine pulling off right now. There is the distinct reason that the Swedish jets can take off and operate on very short runways. Also, side note, love the Dorito too. Look at it, it's great. To explain it in simple terms, the Swedish defence plan broke down to a very pragmatic, we can't win, we will lose land, but the land we will lose will be rendered inhospitable, and the invader will lose so many men that it will not be worth it.
Ugh.
A true blood for the blood god kind of mentality, because quite simply, there would be nothing left to lose. In the midst of all this planning, the Soviets rammed a submarine onto a rock next to one of their naval bases and tried to order them around. The Swedes, thinking things were a bit sus, had a few scanners set up to try and check if the whiskey had any warheads aboard.
Doubt it.
And that's when the news
Doubtfully. Oh my god, this is going to be... Here we go.
came out that submarine had nuclear weapons aboard. So a Soviet submarine with nuclear weapons was stuck on a rock in front of Sweden's premier naval base. This could only go well. Now, the grown-up thing to do would be to admit you had done goofed and apologise to Sweden, work out a deal, get the submarine back, maybe work out some compensation, and say sorry. Notice I said apologise twice in that sentence.
Yes.
This is the Cold War. Nobody is exactly pragmatic, nobody is exactly sane.
No.
The Soviets, being absolute gigabrains, responded to Sweden, and being understandably a little mad at their territory being violated, by ordering 12 warships and a Spetsnaz team to sail straight into Swedish waters and forcefully remove the submarine. The Swedes, having been pushed to their absolute limit, snapped at this outright declaration of an intent to go to
How have I never heard of this before?
war, and the Prime Minister, upon being briefed by his defence force, gave the order. Haul Gunsen. Hold the border. As the warships left Kaliningrad and crossed the Baltic, vegan fighter jets armed with anti-ship missiles took to the skies, with orders to sink any and all Soviet vessels who entered Swedish waters.
Wow.
So too were the coastal artillery units put on full alert. And right about now, Sweden went completely radio silent. Not a peep could be heard by the Soviet naval commander in charge of that squadron. What he may not have initially realised was that that was the signal that Sweden was for all intents and purposes on a war footing and was ready to go should the Soviets cross the border.
Oh.
The Soviet commander contacted Kaliningrad and said the equivalent of, it appears they're not backing down. And within half a mile, I'm not even kidding, half a mile of Swedish waters, the Soviet ships came to a complete stop. And in the great staring contest, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and little old Sweden, the USSR, blinked.
Oh my god.
In the end, diplomacy would win the day. You'd have some Swedish shenanigans of, for example, aiming at and completely locking onto Soviet warships and having the Soviets panic before all of a sudden not doing it and not firing. And other little incidents like that, helicopters tracking other ships, submarines surfacing next to Soviet unarmed vessels going, you really want to screw around? And when I say unarmed vessels, I mean salvage vessels which were there to nick the submarine and take it back. But, as I said, in the end, diplomacy won the day. The Swedish Navy escorted the submarine to international waters, letting them know, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And now the Whiskey on the Rocks incident isn't really discussed much in the Western world. Swedes know about it though, and rightfully so. If you would like to look at a far more detailed insight into what happened from the Swedish perspective, have a look at Scruffy Tales. I'll put a link to his channel in the description, and this is his channel here on screen. He has only 1,000 subs, and he really deserves more. The level of research he put into his video is genuinely incredible.
Oh my
And
god.
I stumbled upon it when I was looking as to whether or not I would cover the topic. I tend to not want to cover topics that are largely covered by other channels, to put something fresh out there. Like, for example, I'm not going to touch the Russian Air Force. That's Anamaki's domain. He's working on a script, and I've seen it. It's a huge script. And last I saw it, he was still in World War II, so God forbid that man has to get that done.
Oh my
But given
god.
that there is an ungodly number of Swedes in my audience, like, there is a genuine lot of you. There are not many Swedes in this world, yet you make up a very significant part of my audience. It's kind of shocking. And the sheer absurdity of everything that happened, I couldn't resist making this video. Also, I apologize if my voice is a little off. I may have had a load of pints and cigars yesterday and yelled very, very loudly at the Russian embassy opposite the pub. It sounds like I'm making that up, but I'm genuinely not. Here's the clip of it.
Oh god. The amount of times that war, the amount of times that the Soviets have come close to getting either war declared on them or doing something stupid, it's just shocking, isn't it, little pug? It's just shocking, isn't it, little pug? Just the amount of times they tried to flex and had to back down. It's incredible. Oh my god. It doesn't surprise me that they wouldn't just apologize and just try to flex on the Swedes. It really doesn't surprise me. But as a clout chaser in Japan found out, don't try to flex on a Viking. Ugh. What is that guy's name? I can't even remember his name, and I don't really want to. But yeah. What is it, little one? Did you really just want to sit here and watch how the Swedes punk the entire Soviet military machine? Yes, you did. Guys, this is my pug, and she is adorable. Yes, she is, and she steals the show. We get to learn about Soviets being punks again. Just how do they? The one thing I didn't learn from that is just how much stuff was screwed up in the general maintenance record of that whiskey. Because my God, are you kidding me? Here's the thing, like, let me try to find that map again. What? Oh my! I'm holding on to you. You're not. If you jump out of my hands, it's gonna be a bad day. Hold on, let me see. Where did that go? There we go. Okay, look. I could understand if they, like, came up here. Or maybe over here on these islands. Or even over here. But here? That means you legitimately had to go through all these straits to get to here. I know, they're full of it, aren't they, little one? You want to tell everybody how full of them are, corn? Go ahead, tell them. You don't want to say anything anymore? Okay, fine. No. Your mom is in trouble. I told her to keep you in there with her. She's in trouble. War Pugs, if this is the last in this series, I'm sad. If this is the last one in this series, I'm actually sad. Because it is funny to me just how I can't say it enough. I can't say it enough. War Pugs. The Russian Navy, the Russian military over the last 2 years has actually stunned me. But it's when looking at the Russian Navy now and the Russian military as a whole, I'm finding out that incompetence isn't a flaw, it's a feature. Yes. Okay. Ow. You just clawed my throat. That wasn't nice. Okay. War Pugs, I'm going to take off from here. I'm going to get this little baby back to her mama. And yeah. This has been yet another episode of Soviets behaving badly and Russians behaving badly in general. How are you going to sit there and try to flex on somebody where you so obviously screwed up? I don't get it. People are weird. Yes, they are. War Pugs, be sure to subscribe to History of Everything. Subscribe to me if you haven't already. She's not going to get much bigger than this. She's going to be this small and adorable. You're going to be this small and adorable forever. Yes, you are. You little thing. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Just, well, you are such a show stealer. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are.